The wooden pews of the Silver Creek Chapel creaked under the weight of judgmental onlookers as Clayton McCall adjusted his bolo tie for the third time. The desert wind howled outside like a scorned lover, rattling the stained glass window behind the altar, a cheap imitation of something you'd find back east. His boot tapped an impatient rhythm against the floorboards, each thud a reminder of the $60,000 debt hanging over the McCall ranch like a vulture. Up front, his old man Silas McCall sat with the smug stillness of a rattler coiled in the shade, his silver-toed boots crossed at the ankles. This wasn't a wedding. It was a foreclosure dressed in Sunday best. Then the doors swung open, and there she was, Eleanor Whitaker, the woman who held the deed to his future in her calloused hands. Clayton's gut twisted. She wasn't the willowy society bride he'd imagined parading around Tucson saloons. No, Eleanor was built like a storm cloud, solid, unapologetic, her calico dress straining at the seams as she marched down the aisle like she owned it. Which technically her family did. The Whitakers' land had the only reliable water source left in the territory, and Clayton's pride was the price of saving his cattle. "Breathe, you idiot," he muttered, fingering the silver spur in his pocket, his mother's last gift. But when Eleanor stopped beside him, she didn't bow her head or simper like the simpering misses at church socials. She squared her shoulders and nailed him with a look so sharp it could have split firewood. "McCall," she said, not bothering with a mister. The preacher's droning faded into the buzz of flies as Clayton realized something terrifying. Eleanor wasn't here to be saved. She was here to fight. The crowd tittered when he croaked out his vows, but Eleanor's "I do" cracked through the chapel like a whip. And that's when he saw it, the glint of a derringer peeking from her lace cuff. A laugh bubbled up in his throat. Of course, his bride came armed. Outside, the Arizona sun baked the dirt road into cracked leather as they stepped into the blinding light. Eleanor didn't wait for him. She strode ahead, her shadow stretching long and lean across the dust. Clayton touched the ring on his finger, cold as a gun barrel, and it hit him. He'd just married a stranger who could probably outshoot him. And damn if that didn't spark something hotter than shame in his chest. Then, because fate had a sense of humor, Eleanor spun on her heel and tossed him a canteen. "Try not to faint, cowboy," she drawled. "We've got a drought to break." The canteen sloshed with what smelled suspiciously like whiskey. Clayton took a swig, coughed, and decided right then that maybe miracles came in unexpected packages. Like a sharp-tongued woman with a hidden gun and a plan. The desert sun hung low over the McCall ranch as Clayton stared at the peeling paint on the porch steps, another thing he'd been meaning to fix. Eleanor's boot heels clicked against the warped floorboards like a countdown timer. She didn't wait for an invitation. She just strode into the house like she'd owned it for years. Maybe she had in her mind. Clayton's spurs jangled as he followed, his throat dry as the dirt outside. "You gonna tell me how you know about Wade skimming cattle?" he demanded. "Or do I gotta guess Eleanor didn't even turn around?" She ran a finger along the dusty mantle, inspecting it, like a general surveying a battlefield. "Your foreman's got a sweetheart over at the Red Lantern Saloon," she said. Real expensive taste for a man drawing ranch wages. A muscle in Clayton's jaw twitched. He'd seen Wade sneaking off to town more often lately, but he'd chalked it up to loneliness. Hell, he'd even felt sorry for the man. Now the truth tasted like bile. "And my old man," he growled. "What's his excuse?" Eleanor finally faced him, her smile razor thin. "Silas. Oh, he's just playing chess while you're out here losing at checkers." She tossed a leather-bound ledger onto the table, his ledger, the one that had gone missing last month. Pages fluttered open, revealing columns of numbers that didn't add up. "Your daddy's been borrowing from the wrong people, Clayton. The kind who collect with bullets, not lawyers." The room tilted. Clayton gripped the table edge, the wood biting into his palms. All those late-night meetings, the whispered arguments with strangers in dusters, it wasn't just gambling debts. Silas had dragged them into a war. Then, because the universe loved a good punchline, the front door burst open. In stumbled Billy Cobb, the youngest ranch hand, his shirt sleeve torn and bloody. "Riders coming up the South Ridge," he panted. "Wade's with 'em, and they ain't looking friendly." Eleanor didn't blink. She just reached under her skirts and pulled out that damn Derringer Clayton had spotted earlier. "Took you long enough to notice," she said, tossing him a Winchester leaning by the door. "Now, cowboy, you want to save your ranch or stand there gaping like a gutted fish?" Something wild flared in Clayton's chest. Maybe it was the whiskey from the canteen. Maybe it was the way Eleanor loaded that pistol like she'd been born with it in her hand. But for the first time in years, he felt awake. Alive. He racked the Winchester's lever with a click-clack that echoed through the house. "All right, Mrs. McCall," he drawled, rolling the title off his tongue like a challenge. "Let's go teach some traitors what happens when they bite the hand that feeds." Eleanor's laugh was short and sharp like a gunshot. "Now that's the first smart thing you've said all day." Outside, the wind carried the sound of hoofbeats and the sweet, dangerous promise of gun smoke. Clayton's fingers twitched near his Colt as the heavy footsteps echoed across the porch. Eleanor didn't even flinch. She just snapped the ledger shut with a thud that made Wade jump like a spooked horse. "Relax, McKinley," she said, her voice dripping with mock sweetness. "They're my boys. Though I can't promise they won't shoot you if you keep eyeballing that six-shooter like a sinner-eyed salvation." The door swung open, revealing 3 men who looked like they'd been carved from the same granite as the canyon cliffs. The tallest, a half-Comanche with a scar running through his eyebrow, nodded at Eleanor. "Boss." Wade's Adam's apple bobbed. Clayton barely recognized his own foreman in this sweating, trembling shell of a man. Eleanor tossed the leather journal to Scarface. "Jesse, take Mr. McKinley for a walk. Show him what happens to thieves in my territory." Jesse grinned, revealing a gold-capped tooth. With pleasure, Wade lunged for the window and found himself staring down the barrel of Jesse's Schofield before his boot even left the floor. Now, Jesse tutted. "Ain't you heard running just makes the lesson stick harder?" Clayton should have felt satisfaction. Instead, his gut churned. He'd known Wade since he was a kid stealing peaches from Old Man Higgins's orchard. But before he could speak, Eleanor's voice sliced through the room like a skinning knife. "Problem husband." She arched a brow, tapping the ledger. "Or would you rather? I let him bleed this ranch dry while you play cowboy." The words stung because they were true. Clayton had been so busy drowning in whiskey and self-pity, he hadn't noticed the vultures circling. But Eleanor had. Hell, she'd probably been counting their feathers. Outside, a sudden commotion erupted, hooves pounding a man's sharp cry. Clayton moved to the window, just in time to see Wade thrown over a saddle like a sack of grain, his wrists tied with the same rope he'd used to steal McCall cattle. Eleanor joined him at the glass, her breath fogging the pain. "Don't worry," she murmured. "He'll live. Mostly." Then softer, "But the next man who crosses us won't." Something in her tone made Clayton turn. The fading sunlight caught the steel in her eyes, and for the first time, he saw it not just the cunning, but the why. This wasn't just about land or water. It was about survival. And Eleanor Whitaker, no McCall, now had been fighting that war long before she'd said "I do." The realization hit him like a stray bullet. She's not the storm. She's the damn lighthouse. Jesse reappeared in the doorway, wiping his hands on a bandana. "Where to, boss?" Eleanor didn't hesitate. "Ride to town. Find Silas. Tell him." Her lips curled. "Tell him the new sheriff's in town, and she collects debts at sundown." As Jesse mounted up, Clayton reached for Eleanor's hand and found it already holding the Derringer. He snorted. "Christ, woman. You ever not armed?" She finally smiled, real and dangerous. "On our wedding night, maybe? If you play your cards right." The Winchester felt suddenly lighter in Clayton's grip. The ranch wasn't saved. Hell, the real fight was just beginning. But for the first time in years, The weight on his shoulders didn't feel like it might crush him. It felt like something to push against. The rifle shot still echoed in Clayton's ears when Eleanor moved faster than he'd have thought possible for a woman in skirts. She was at the gun rack before he'd even cleared his Colt from its holster, tossing him a double-barreled shotgun like she was passing the salt. "Hope you're a better shot than you are at picking foremen," she said already at the door, that damned derringer gleaming in her hand. Outside chaos unfolded like a bad deck of cards. Wade was spurring his horse toward the South Ridge rifle, smoking. Hank, the mountain of a man who'd been escorting him, was down on one knee cursing as blood seeped through his fingers. The other two men, Jesse and a wiry Mexican with silver conchos down his pants, were already mounted, but Wade had a hell of a head start. Clayton racked the shotgun. "He'll make for Delan's crew," he growled. Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "You knew." "Not until right damn now." Clayton spat in the dirt. But only Cormac Delan would be fool enough to buy loyalty with a bullet. A beat passed between them, silent, electric. Then Eleanor did something unexpected. She laughed. Not the polite titter of some society miss, but a full-throated wild thing that made the horses prick their ears. "Well, ain't this a pretty mess?" She vaulted onto Jesse's horse behind him without waiting for an invitation. "You coming, McCall? Or you gonna stand there, looking heroic?" Clayton didn't need telling twice. He swung up onto the nearest horse, a piebald mare with fire in her eyes, and kicked her into a gallop. The wind tore at his shirt as they raced after Wade, the landscape blurring into streaks of ochre and sage. Somewhere along the chase, three things became clear. First, Wade wasn't just running from something. He was running to someone. The bastard kept glancing back like he expected salvation over that ridge. Second, Eleanor could ride like the devil himself was after her. She leaned into Jesse's back, her skirts whipping in the wind, whooping like a Comanche on a raid. And third, most damning of all, Clayton was enjoying himself. The realization hit him as they crested the ridge. Below them, Wade's horse stumbled in a gopher hole, sending the traitor flying. The man scrambled up, rifle raised, but froze when he found himself staring down 4 gun barrels. End of the line, McKinley Clayton drawled the shotgun steady in his hands. Wade's eyes darted to the canyon beyond them, where dust plumes signaled riders approaching. A lot of them. Eleanor sighed. Oh, good. Company. She checked the Derringer's load with practiced ease. "You ever killed a man, Clayton?" The question should have chilled him. Instead, he felt oddly calm. Not yet. She nodded toward the advancing dust cloud. "Today's your lucky day, then." And just like that, the fear was gone. Replaced by something hotter, sharper, the same fire he'd seen in Eleanor's eyes when she'd said her vows. Clayton McCall smiled for the first time in years. "Guess we're really married now, darling." Eleanor's answering grin was all teeth. "Welcome to the war, cowboy." As Delan's men thundered into view, Clayton realized 2 truths with crystal clarity. He might die today, but by God, he'd do it standing beside a woman who made hell itself seem like a worthy opponent. The flames licked up the porch posts like thirsty serpents as Clayton watched Eleanor stuff those damned papers into her satchel with the same calm she might use to pack a picnic. Smoke curled around her skirts, and for a wild moment, he wondered if she was part dragon. "Those better be worth dying for," he coughed, shoving his Colt into its holster and grabbing the Winchester. Eleanor didn't even look up. "Oh, they are." She snapped the satchel shut with finality. "Turns out your daddy wasn't just bad at cards. He was sitting on a silver vein that runs straight through McCall land. Delan's known for months." Clayton froze. Silver. The word hung in the air like gunpowder. All those business trips to Tucson, the whispered meetings, his father hadn't been gambling away their future. He'd been selling it piece by piece. A bullet shattered the last intact window, spraying glass like diamond rain. Outside, Wade's voice carried over the crackling flames. "Smoke 'em out or shoot 'em dead, boys. Delan wants that satchel." Eleanor finally met Clayton's eyes, her face smudged with soot, her gaze blazing. "Plan." Clayton racked the Winchester. You're asking me. Surprise me. The roof groaned as flames ate through the rafters. Somewhere in the inferno, a portrait of Silas McCall crashed to the floor, its frame splitting like the man's promises. Clayton kicked open the back wall panel, the one he'd loosened years ago, to sneak out to barn dances, and revealed a narrow crawl space. After you, Mrs. McCall. Eleanor arched a brow. A secret passage, now you're talking. She slid into the darkness satchel, clutched to her chest like a newborn. The crawl space emptied into the root cellar, its dank air a relief after the smoke. Above them, boots pounded across the burning floorboards. Clayton pressed his ear to the cellar door, just as Wade's voice drifted down. Check the barn again. They ain't ghosts. Eleanor's fingers brushed Clayton's wrist, a shock of warmth in the cool dark. Silver explains everything, she whispered. Why Doulan wanted the land. Why your father agreed to our marriage. Why? She hesitated. Why my own pa was so eager to make the deal. Clayton stilled. You didn't know? Not until I saw the assay reports in your father's desk. Her laugh was bitter. Turns out we're both pawns, cowboy. A thunderous crash shook the house above as the roof caved in. Embers rained through the cellar cracks like hellish fireflies. Time was up. Clayton yanked the cellar door open to reveal the storm cellar's exterior exit, and the barrel of Wade's rifle pointed straight at his chest. Well, looky here. Wade sneered, finger tightening on the trigger. The happy cow. Crack. Wade dropped like a sack of wet flour, revealing Jesse standing 10 paces behind him, smoking Schofield in hand. The half-Comanche tipped his hat. You two lovebirds need a ride, or you want to keep playing hide-and-seek. Eleanor stepped over Wade's body without a glance. Took you long enough. As they sprinted for the horses, the McCall ranch house collapsed in a shower of sparks behind them. Clayton didn't look back. Some things like trust, like family, burned quick and left only what mattered standing. He swung onto the piebald mare and reached for Eleanor. Where to? She vaulted up behind him, her arms wrapping around his waist, the satchel of secrets pressed between them. Where else? Her breath was warm against his ear. To dig up our fortune. And as they galloped into the blood-orange sunset, Clayton McCall realized two things. First, he'd married a woman who could outthink the devil. Second, he couldn't wait to see what she'd do next. The barn doors shuddered as hoofbeats pounded closer, kicking up dust that glowed red in the firelight. Clayton pressed his eye to a crack in the wood and saw the devil's own cavalry riding hard toward them. A dozen of Doulan's men, their bandanas pulled up over their faces like outlaws in a dime novel. At the front, a familiar figure rode tall in the saddle, Ezekiel Whitaker, Eleanor's father, his silver hair gleaming like a trader's badge. Eleanor made a sound Clayton had never heard from her before, a wounded animal noise. Well, she said, her voice suddenly light. Looks like family reunions are overrated. Hank spat a stream of tobacco juice into the hay. That the bastard who raised you, ma'am. Raised me. Eleanor checked the cylinder of her revolver with a click, click, click. No, that's the bastard who sold me. Her smile was all teeth. Twice, apparently, Clayton felt something hot and ugly uncoil in his chest. He'd known men like Ezekiel, men who treated daughters like bargaining chips and land like God's own lottery. But seeing the raw hurt flash across Eleanor's face before she locked it away, that made it personal. Outside, Ezekiel reined up just beyond rifle range. Eleanor, he called, voice slick as snake oil. Come on out now. No need for bloodshed. Jesse snorted. Says the man who brought 20 guns to a family chat. Eleanor didn't blink. She just shouldered past Clayton and threw open the barn doors like she was greeting guests at a church social. The move was so brazen, even Doulan's men hesitated. Hello, Pa. She drawled, thumbs hooked in her gun belt. Funny, last time I checked, you don't ride with outlaws. Or is bankrolling them different? Ezekiel's smile didn't reach his eyes. Business is business, girl. You'd know that if I... What? Eleanor took a step forward, the firelight painting her in hellish hues. Had your moral compass your honor? She barked a laugh. Tell me, did you at least get top dollar for betraying your own flesh and blood? A murmur ran through the riders. Even killers had lines they wouldn't cross. Clayton moved to stand beside her, Winchester loose at his side. You picked the wrong day to visit Ezekiel. The older man's gaze flicked to the satchel at Eleanor's hip. Hand over the land deeds and railroad surveys, and I'll let you two walk away. Walk away. Eleanor's hand drifted toward her derringer. Oh, we're walking all right. Straight to the territorial governor with proof you've been conspiring to commit land fraud. A gun cocked in the sudden silence. It wasn't Ezekiel. Wasn't Doulan's men. From the shadows behind them, Silas McCall stepped into the firelight, his pearl-handled Colt pointed at Clayton's back. Sorry, son, he said, not sounding sorry at all. But this is bigger than family. The twist hit Clayton like a gut punch. His own father. The man who taught him to ride to shoot now, standing with the vultures. Eleanor didn't flinch. Well, she murmured. The rats are all coming out tonight. Then, because the universe loved a good punchline, the first drops of rain began to fall, not some gentle sprinkle. A full-bore desert downpour that turned the yard to mud in seconds. The fire hissed like a dying beast as smoke and steam swallowed the scene. In the chaos, Clayton saw his chance. He lunged for Silas, not to disarm him, but to yank the gold watch from his vest. The same watch that had gone missing the night of the wedding. Recognize this? Clayton flipped it open to reveal the tiny railroad survey map tucked inside. You've been playing both sides from the start. Silas's face went slack with shock. That's when the shooting started. Not from Doulan's men, not from Ezekiel. From the ridge above them, a volley of rifle fire sent Doulan's gang scrambling. Clayton caught a glimpse of star-shaped badges glinting in the storm Texas Rangers led by a familiar figure on a paint horse. Jesse whooped. Told y'all I sent word to my cousins. Eleanor grabbed Clayton's arm as the world dissolved into gunfire and thunder. Time to go, cowboy. They ran for the horses, the satchel of secrets slapping against Eleanor's hip, the rain washing away the last of Clayton's illusions. Some men inherited land, some inherited lies, and some, if they were damn lucky, inherited a partner who could outshoot, outthink, and outlast every backstabber this side of the Rio Grande. As they spurred their horses into the storm, one truth burned brighter than any fire. This wasn't an ending. It was the first real ride of their lives. The rain had turned to a fine mist hanging in the air like gun smoke as Clayton watched Doulan's men circle his father. The bastard stood there in his tailored duster boots, polished enough to see your sins in looking for all the world like a gentleman, making a business proposition rather than a thief at gunpoint. Here's what's going to happen. Cyrus Doulan called out, voice smooth as aged whiskey. You're going to sign over the deed to McCall Ranch, and I'm going to forget about that little incident with my nephew last spring. Clayton's fingers tightened around the Winchester. Incident, he muttered. Eleanor's laugh was dark. Oh, this just gets better. Your daddy shot Doulan's nephew over a poker debt. She peered through a knothole in the barn wall. Though from the look on Doulan's face, I'd say he's more interested in silver than vengeance. Inside the barn, Hank cocked his revolver with a sound like fate clicking into place. We got 3 options, boss. Die hiding, die fighting, or we change the game. Eleanor finished. She reached into her satchel and pulled out a bundle of dynamite sticks. Where the hell had she been keeping those tied with what looked like hair ribbons? Frank, how's your arm? The wiry Mexican grinned. Good enough to light this candle, senora. Clayton stared at the explosives, then at Eleanor's calm expression. You've been holding out on me, woman. She winked. Husband dear, you don't even know the half of it. Outside, Doulan was getting impatient. Last chance Cyrus sign or. The explosion rocked the north pasture, sending Doulan's men scrambling as a fireball lit up the night. Not close enough to hurt anyone, just close enough to cause chaos. In the confusion, 3 things happened at once. Silas McCall made a break for his horse, proving once and for all where his loyalties lay. Doulan's men opened fire blindly into the smoke, hitting nothing but air and bad intentions. and Eleanor Whitaker McCall stepped out of the barn like the angel of death herself, that damned derringer in one hand, and the real railroad map in the other. Looking for this Cormac, she called, her voice cutting through the chaos. Doolan froze. His eyes locked on the map, then narrowed. "You lying little..." Eleanor tisked. "Now is that any way to talk to the woman who just saved you from wasting a fortune on worthless land?" Clayton moved up beside her, Winchester at the ready. The pieces were falling into place now. The whole damn scheme, the forced marriage, the stolen cattle, even Wade's betrayal, had been about one thing: Doolan's obsession with controlling the railroad route. Only the route he'd bet everything on was a phantom. Doolan's face twisted into something ugly. Kill them. Kill them all and burn that. A rifle shot cracked from the ridge. Doolan's hat flew off his head, a neat hole through the crown. Every head turned to see a line of riders silhouetted against the storm-lit sky, not rangers this time, but a dozen hard-eyed men and women in dusters, led by a gray-haired woman with a Winchester that still smoked. Eleanor sighed. "About time, Abuela." The old woman spat tobacco juice into the dirt. "You call this a rescue, Nina? I taught you better." Clayton looked between the newcomers and his wife. Family. Eleanor's smile was all teeth. The kind that actually shows up when you need them. As Doolan's men began laying down their weapons, smart enough to know when they were outgunned, Clayton realized something. He'd spent his life running from the McCall name. But standing there in the rain with a dynamite-toting wife and a grandmother who could shoot the wings off a fly at 200 yards, he figured maybe it was time to start living up to it. The ranch was in ruins. The future was uncertain, but by God, it was going to be interesting. Doolan's silver hair seemed to glow in the firelight as his hands twitched near his pearl-handled Colts. The marshal's rifles didn't waver, but the outlaw's smirk returned like a bad penny. "Marshal Thompson," he drawled, "you arresting me for protecting my business interests." Eleanor didn't give the lawman a chance to answer. She reached into her bodice, Clayton nearly choked, and produced a second document, this one bearing the governor's seal. "How about we arrest you for conspiracy to commit murder, land fraud, and..." She paused for effect. "Tax evasion on 3 territories worth of stolen cattle." Even the marshals blinked at that last one. Doolan's face went slack. "That's impossible." "Those records were," burned Eleanor, finished sweetly. "Your bookkeeper talks when properly motivated. Something about a pregnant wife and a sudden attack of conscience. The standoff might have lasted forever, if not for 2 things. First, Abuela's rifle barrel pressing into Doolan's kidney from behind. "Drop the pistols, hijo de puta." My trigger finger gets twitchy past midnight. Second, and more spectacular, Silas McCall choosing that moment to make a break for it. His fancy boots slipping in the mud as he scrambled toward the burning ruins of the ranch house. The strongbox, he screamed. It's all in the upstairs bedroom chose that moment to collapse in a shower of sparks, cutting off both Silas's confession and his escape route. The old man skidded to a stop just shy of the flames, his reflection dancing in the puddles like the ghost of bad decisions. Clayton exhaled hard. Somewhere between the dynamite and the derringer, he'd lost the capacity for shock. Anyone else want to confess to anything he called out? Now's the time. To his surprise, Ezekiel Whitaker stepped forward, hands raised. "I'll testify against Doolan." "Full confession." His eyes met Eleanor's. "For my daughter's forgiveness." The silence that followed could have choked a horse. Eleanor's laugh, when it came, was colder than a Montana winter. "Oh, Pa." She holstered her derringer with a snap. "You don't get to buy absolution, but you do get to rot in prison next to your business partner." She turned to Marshal Thompson. "Take them all. The governor wants this wrapped up neat." As the marshals began rounding up Doolan's crew, Clayton found himself staring at the ruins of McCall Ranch. The house was gone. The barn was half-burned. "And yet, you planned this from the start," he said to Eleanor. She shrugged, but there was something vulnerable in it. "Planned to survive." Abuela spat in the dirt. Dios mio, you two. You just destroyed a criminal empire and all you can do is stare. She jerked her chin toward the eastern horizon where the first hints of dawn painted the sky. We got work to do. Silver to mine. Railroad to build. Clayton looked at Eleanor, really looked at her. The soot on her cheeks. The singed hem of her dress. The way she held that damned satchel like it held the future. He held out his hand. Partners. Eleanor took at her grip firm. Partners. And as the sun rose over what was left of McCall Ranch, Clayton realized something. Some fires destroy, others cleanse, and the best ones. They forged something new in the ashes. The morning sun painted the new railroad depot in gold as Clayton McCall leaned against the freshly painted porch rail, watching his wife negotiate with a group of Eastern investors. 6 months had turned Eleanor's satchel of secrets into a small empire water contracts freight agreements, and enough political clout to make territorial governors return her telegrams within the hour. Still can't believe it, can you? Clayton turned to find his father standing behind him, hat in hand. Silas McCall looked older somehow, the prison stint having carved lines the Arizona sun never could. The old man nodded toward Eleanor, who was currently schooling some Wall Street type on irrigation rights. She's something else. Clayton took a long sip of coffee. That she is. A beat passed. Then Silas cleared his throat. About the silver vein. Don't. Clayton's voice carried no anger, just finality. You lost the right to that conversation when you chose Delan over family. Silas flinched, but nodded. To both their surprise, it was Eleanor who broke the tension, calling from across the yard. Mr. McCall, you're just in time. These gentlemen need convincing that a man of your experience can manage our new mining operation. Clayton's eyebrows shot up. Eleanor's smile was all innocence as she added, unless you'd rather I hired someone else. The unspoken offer hung in the air, redemption, if Silas could earn it. The old rancher straightened his vest with trembling hands. I'll handle it. As he walked away, Clayton caught Eleanor's eye. You're too soft, Mrs. McCall, he teased. She sidled up beside him, her work-roughened fingers brushing his. Hardly. I just know a good investment when I see one. Her gaze drifted to the horizon, where the first train whistle echoed through the valley. Besides, every empire needs its villains turned advisors. Gives the storytellers something to work with. Clayton barked a laugh. God, he loved this woman. The moment shattered as a commotion erupted near the depot. Jesse and Abuela, dragging in a sputtering, well-dressed man. Caught this one snooping around the water tower, Jesse announced. Eleanor sighed. Another railroad spy. Nah, Abuela cackled, producing a notebook from the man's jacket. Worse. A reporter. The Easterner straightened his spectacles. Horace Whittington, New York Tribune. The public has a right to know how a backwater ranch became the most powerful. Tell you what, Mr. Whittington, Eleanor interrupted, plucking the notebook from Abuela's hands. You print the real story about how a fat backwater bride outsmarted an entire criminal syndicate, and I'll give you exclusive rights to our railroad expansion plans. She leaned in. But misquote me, and my grandmother here will teach you frontier journalism. Up close. The man gulped as Abuela fondled her rifle. Clayton slipped an arm around Eleanor's waist as the reporter scurried away. Remind me never to play poker with you. She turned in his arms, her eyes alight with mischief. Too late, cowboy. You're all in. And as the noon train rolled into McCall Station, its whistles singing across the land they'd built together, Clayton realized something. The best stories aren't about the battles you fight. They're about who's standing beside you when the smoke clears.